The morning sun cast long shadows across the FBI training facility in Quantico, Virginia. As Agent Sarah Chen adjusted her grip on the Glock 19, she'd been standing at lane 7 for the past hour, methodically working through her qualification. Scores, each shot finding its mark with mechanical precision. The other agents had long since finished their mandatory training and moved on to other duties, but Sarah remained, chasing perfection that always seemed just out of reach. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. She wasn't here because she struggled with marksmanship. Quite the opposite. Sarah Chen was the most accurate shooter the FBI Academy had seen in 15 years, with scores that consistently shattered records. She was here because tomorrow would mark 6 months since her assignment to the Bureau's elite hostage rescue team, and she still felt like an outsider looking in. The electronic target whirred as it traveled back toward her position, revealing another perfect grouping. 25 shots, 25 hits within the X-ring. Sarah ejected the magazine and began reloading, her movements fluid and practiced. She'd learned to shoot from her father, a retired Marine who'd insisted that precision was a mindset, not just a skill. Every breath controlled, every trigger pulled deliberate, every shot a commitment to excellence. The Archer facility buzzed with its usual morning energy as tactical teams prepared for various training scenarios. Sarah could hear the distant sound of helicopter rotors and the sharp crack of sniper rifles from the advanced training ranges. This was supposed to be her world now, the pinnacle of federal law enforcement, but 6 months in, she still felt like she was fighting for acceptance rather than focusing on the mission. The irony wasn't lost on her. Sarah had graduated top of her class from the FBI Academy, excelled in every tactical scenario, and demonstrated leadership qualities that her instructors consistently praised. Her psychological evaluations showed exceptional stress tolerance and decision-making capabilities under pressure. On paper, she was exactly what the hostage rescue team needed. In practice, she was the first Asian American woman ever assigned to the unit, and that distinction came with baggage she hadn't anticipated. Team leader Marcus Rodriguez had made his position clear from day one. During her first briefing, he'd looked her up and down with the expression of someone examining a piece of equipment he wasn't sure would function properly. "The HRT isn't a diversity program," he'd said, his voice carrying the weight of 15 years in federal law enforcement. "We're not here to make political statements or break glass ceilings. We're here to save lives, and that requires operators who can handle the pressure when everything goes sideways." Sarah had nodded respectfully, understanding the subtext. She would need to prove herself not just as an agent, but as someone worthy of wearing the HRT badge. What she hadn't expected was how systematically Rodriguez would work to undermine her confidence and exclude her from the informal networks that really mattered. The targeting system beeped, indicating her session was complete. Sarah holstered her weapon and gathered her gear, noting that her latest scores had improved by another 2 points. Marginal gains that reflected hours of additional practice. The kind of obsessive attention to detail that had defined her entire career. She'd learned early that being exceptional wasn't enough when you were also different. You had to be undeniably, unquestionably better than everyone else. As she walked toward the main building, Sarah passed the tactical planning room where Rodriguez was conducting a briefing for the Alpha team. Through the glass windows, she could see the dozen male operators gathered around a tactical display, studying building schematics and discussing entry strategies. These were the informal sessions where real learning happened, where experience was shared and trust was built. Sarah had never been invited to attend. Instead, she'd been assigned to what Rodriguez called foundational training. Equipment maintenance, physical conditioning, and endless repetitions of basic tactical procedures. Important work, certainly, but not the advanced scenarios that would prepare her for actual HRT operations. When she'd requested access to the advanced training modules, Rodriguez had smiled condescendingly and suggested she focus on mastering the fundamentals before moving on to more complex operations. The message was clear. Sarah was being managed rather than developed, contained rather than integrated. Rodriguez seemed to view her presence as a necessary inconvenience, something to be tolerated rather than leveraged. He assigned her to support roles during training exercises, excluded her from tactical planning sessions, and consistently paired her with junior agents rather than the experienced operators who could mentor her development. Agent David Kim approached as she entered the building, his expression a mixture of sympathy and frustration. Kim was one of the few agents who'd attempted to bridge the gap between Sarah and the rest of the team, though his efforts were often met with subtle discouragements from Rodriguez. "How'd the range session go?" he asked, falling into step beside her. "Same as always," Sarah replied, keeping her voice neutral. "Consistent scores, steady improvement." Kim nodded, but his expression suggested he understood the deeper implications. Sarah's marksmanship scores were legendary throughout the facility, yet Rodriguez consistently downplayed her abilities during team meetings. He'd make comments about range shooting being different from operational shooting, suggesting that her accuracy was somehow artificial or unrealistic. The implication was that Sarah could hit stationary targets, but might falter when lives were on the line. "Rodriguez is briefing a new scenario today," Kim said quietly. "High-value target extraction from a fortified position. Complex entry requirements, multiple contingencies." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. He paused, then added, "Your tactical analysis skills would be valuable for something like that." Sarah appreciated Kim's support, but they both knew that suggesting her inclusion would likely result in subtle retaliation against him. Rodriguez had made it clear that questioning his personnel decisions was unwelcome, and agents who pushed too hard found themselves assigned to less desirable duties. The pattern had become depressingly familiar. Sarah would demonstrate exceptional performance in one area, only to have Rodriguez shift the focus to some other skill set where she supposedly needed improvement. When her physical fitness scores ranked among the highest in the unit, he emphasized her lack of field experience. When she excelled in tactical simulations, he questioned her ability to work effectively as part of a team. Every achievement was met with a new barrier, every success redefined as evidence of some other deficiency. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from her younger brother in Seattle. "Saw the news about the FBI's new training initiatives. Mom's telling everyone her daughter is saving the world." The message made her smile despite her frustration. Her family understood her work only in broad terms, but their pride was genuine and unconditional. They believed in her capabilities. Without reservation, a stark contrast to the constant scrutiny she faced at Quantico. She typed back a brief response, not mentioning the daily challenges she was navigating. Her family had sacrificed too much to help her reach this position for her to burden them with complaints about workplace politics. Her parents had immigrated to the United States with nothing but determination and a belief that America rewarded merit over connections. Sarah was their validation of that faith, proof that hard work and excellence could overcome any obstacle. The irony was that Sarah's background should have made her invaluable to the HRT. She spoke 3 languages fluently, had studied international criminal organizations during her graduate work, and brought analytical skills that complemented the tactical expertise of her teammates. During the few operational briefings she'd been allowed to attend, her insights had proven consistently valuable. She'd identified tactical vulnerabilities that others had missed, suggested communication strategies that improved operational efficiency, and demonstrated a strategic mindset that impressed even skeptical supervisors. None of that seemed to matter to Rodriguez. If anything, her contributions appeared to irritate him further, as if her competence was somehow a personal affront. During team meetings, he'd listen to her suggestions with visible impatience, then assign credit for her ideas to other team members when presenting plans to higher command. Sarah had learned to document her contributions carefully, but challenging. Rodriguez directly would be professional suicide. The exclusion extended beyond tactical operations into the social dynamics that bonded the team together. After-hours gatherings at local bars, weekend training sessions, and informal mentorship relationships that helped junior agents develop relationships with senior operatives. Sarah found herself consistently excluded from these activities, usually through the simple expedient of not being informed they were happening. Agent Lisa Morrison, one of the few women in the broader HRT support structure, had warned Sarah about these dynamics during her first week. "Rodriguez isn't necessarily malicious," Morrison had said carefully, "but he's old school, and old school means proving yourself in ways that aren't always fair or logical. Some agents get the benefit of the doubt. Others have to earn every ounce of respect." Sarah had appreciated the honesty, though she'd hoped that exceptional performance would be enough to overcome initial skepticism. 6 months later, she was beginning to understand that Rodriguez's resistance wasn't based on questions about her abilities. It was rooted in fundamental assumptions about who belonged in elite federal law enforcement and who represented unwelcome change. The training facility's main corridor was lined with photographs of HRT operations spanning 3 decades. Hostage rescues, counter-terrorism operations, and high-risk arrests that had saved countless lives. Sarah studied these images regularly, imagining herself as part of that legacy. The operators in the photographs shared a certain intensity, a focus that transcended individual personalities and welded them into an effective unit. She wanted desperately to be part of that brotherhood, to contribute to missions that mattered, and work alongside agents who trusted her completely. Instead, she found herself perpetually on the outside, watching real operators prepare for scenarios she wasn't allowed to train for, discussing tactics she wasn't permitted to help develop. The morning briefing was scheduled for 10 o'clock, and Sarah arrived early as usual, hoping to demonstrate her commitment through punctuality and preparation. The briefing room was already occupied by several senior agents, including Rodriguez, who looked up with his customary expression of mild annoyance when she entered. "Agent Chen," he said formally, "I have your assignment for today's training cycle." Sarah waited expectantly, hoping for something more challenging than equipment maintenance or basic tactical drills. Instead, Rodriguez handed her a clipboard with a list of administrative tasks that would keep her busy for the entire day. Supply inventory, equipment inspections, and report filing. Important work, but not the kind of training that would prepare her for operational assignments. "Sir," she said carefully, "I was hoping to participate in the tactical scenario plan for today. My analysis of the target building identified several entry points that might be worth considering." Rodriguez's expression hardened slightly. "Agent Chen, your analysis was noted, but this operation requires experienced personnel who can execute complex tactics under pressure. Your time would be better spent mastering the foundational skills that support operational effectiveness." The dismissal was polite, but absolute. Sarah nodded professionally, accepting the assignment while internally cataloging another example of systematic exclusion. Around the room, other agents avoided eye contact, recognizing the uncomfortable dynamics but unwilling to challenge their team leader's decisions. Agent Kim stepped forward, his expression thoughtful. "Sir, Agent Chen's tactical assessments have been consistently accurate during previous briefings. Her insights might enhance the training scenario." Rodriguez turned his attention to Kim with the kind of stare that suggested career limiting. Choices were being made. "Agent Kim, I appreciate your input, but personnel assignments are my responsibility. Perhaps you should focus on your own preparation rather than second-guessing my decisions." The rebuke was sharp enough to silence further discussion, and Kim stepped back with an apologetic glance toward Sarah. She appreciated his attempt to advocate for her, but understood that pushing further would only result in retaliation against him. As the briefing concluded and agents dispersed to their various assignments, Sarah remained behind to organize her equipment and review the administrative tasks she'd been given. The work was straightforward but time-consuming, designed to keep her occupied while the real training happened elsewhere. She was interrupted by the arrival of Deputy Director Janet Walsh, a senior FBI official who oversaw HRT operations from the Bureau's headquarters. Walsh was known for her direct communication style and her insistence on operational excellence above all other considerations. Her unexpected presence at the training facility suggested something significant was developing. "Agent Chen," Walsh said, approaching with purposeful strides, "I need to speak with you privately." Sarah followed Walsh to a small conference room away from the main training areas. The deputy director closed the door and gestured for Sarah to take a seat across from her at the narrow table. "I've been reviewing performance reports from the Bunry HRT program," Walsh began without preamble. "Your scores are exceptional across every measurable category. Marksmanship, physical fitness, tactical knowledge, psychological evaluations. According to the numbers, you should be one of our most valuable operators." Sarah waited, uncertain whether this was leading toward praise or criticism. Walsh's expression was unreadable, professional in a way that suggested important decisions were being considered. "However," Walsh continued, "I'm also seeing concerning patterns in your assignment history. Limited operational training, exclusion from advanced scenarios, and a notable absence from tactical planning sessions. Can you explain this discrepancy?" The question put Sarah in an impossible position. Criticizing Rodriguez directly would appear insubordinate and potentially damage her career. But pretending that everything was normal would misrepresent the systematic barriers she was facing. "Ma'am," Sarah said carefully, "I believe Team Leader Rodriguez is ensuring that I receive comprehensive foundational training before advancing to more complex operations. His approach is methodical and thorough." Walsh studied Sarah's expression with the kind of intensity that suggested she was reading between the lines. "Agent Chen, let me be direct. The FBI invested significant resources in your training, and your performance metrics suggest exceptional potential. If there are institutional barriers preventing you from reaching that potential, I need to know about them." Sarah appreciated Walsh's directness, but understood the broader implications of any response she might give. Accusations of discrimination or unfair treatment would need to be substantiated with evidence, and building such a case would require resources and political capital she didn't possess. "I believe the training program is designed to ensure operational readiness," Sarah replied diplomatically. "My focus is on meeting whatever standards are established and contributing effectively to the team's mission." Walsh nodded slowly, but her expression suggested she understood the subtext of Sarah's carefully neutral response. "Very well. But I want you to know that this conversation is part of a broader review of HRT training protocols. Excellence should be recognized and developed, regardless of other considerations." After Walsh departed, Sarah returned to her administrative duties with a renewed sense of uncertainty. The deputy director's visit suggested that her situation was being noticed at higher levels, but whether that attention would result in positive change or additional scrutiny remained unclear. The afternoon passed slowly as Sarah worked through equipment inventories and supply reports. The administrative work was mind-numbing but necessary, and she approached it with the same attention to detail she brought to every other aspect of her job. Through the windows of the supply room, she could see other agents conducting tactical training exercises, practicing close-quarters combat techniques, and coordinated assault procedures. Around 4 o'clock, Agent Kim appeared at the supply room door, his expression troubled. "Sarah, something's happening. Rodriguez just got a call from command, and he's pulling together an emergency response team for what sounds like a real operation." Sarah looked up from her inventory sheets, immediately alert. Real operations were rare for the HRT, reserved for situations that exceeded the capabilities of local law enforcement and required federal intervention. These were the moments that justified years of training and preparation. "What kind of situation?" she asked. Kim glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard, then stepped closer. "From what I could gather, there's a hostage situation developing in Richmond. Armed subjects have taken control of a federal courthouse, and local SWAT teams are requesting HRT assistance. Rodriguez is selecting a response team right now." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. This was exactly the kind of high-stakes operation she'd been training for, the reason she'd sought assignment to the HRT in the first place. Real hostages, real danger, and the opportunity to put her skills to use in service of something that truly mattered. "Has he announced team assignments?" she asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Kim's expression confirmed her fears. "Alpha Team, standard configuration. Experienced operators only, according to Rodriguez." He specifically mentioned this isn't a training situation where experimental personnel assignments could be considered. The phrase experimental personnel stung more than Sarah cared to admit. After 6 months of exemplary performance, she was still being characterized as an unknown quantity rather than a proven asset. The implication was that her presence on an operational team would represent an unacceptable risk rather than a valuable contribution. Sarah returned to her inventory work with renewed determination, though her mind was racing through tactical scenarios and operational possibilities. She'd studied hostage situations extensively during her academic preparation and had demonstrated exceptional performance in every simulated crisis she'd encountered. Her psychological evaluations consistently showed optimal stress responses and decision-making capabilities under pressure. None of that seemed to matter when real operations were being planned. Rodriguez's assessment of her readiness appeared to be based on factors other than demonstrated competence, and those factors were unlikely to change regardless of her continued excellence in training scenarios. As the afternoon progressed, Sarah could hear increased activity throughout the facility as the emergency response team prepared for deployment. Equipment was being loaded, vehicles were being prepared, and communication systems were being tested. The energy was infectious, the kind of focused intensity that characterized professionals preparing to face genuine danger in service of others. Agent Morrison appeared at the supply room door around 5 o'clock, her expression sympathetic but determined. "Sarah, Rodriguez wants all non-essential personnel to clear the tactical areas while the response team completes their preparation. He's concerned about distractions during final briefings." Sarah nodded understanding, though the designation of non-essential personnel felt like another deliberate slight. She was a fully trained HRT agent with exceptional qualifications. Being excluded from an operation she was perfectly capable of supporting. As she gathered her equipment and prepared to leave the supply room, Sarah's secure communication device suddenly activated with an incoming priority message. The device was reserved for urgent official communications, and receiving such a message during an active operation was highly unusual. The message was brief but stunning. "Agent Chen, report to Tactical Operations Center immediately for operational briefing. Priority assignment authorized by Deputy Director Walsh. Confirm receipt." Sarah stared at the device, reading the message twice to ensure she understood correctly. Deputy Director Walsh had apparently intervened directly, overriding Rodriguez's personnel decisions and assigning Sarah to the operational team. It was an unprecedented move that would undoubtedly create significant tension, but it was also the opportunity Sarah had been waiting for. She quickly gathered her tactical gear and headed toward the operations center, her mind already shifting into the focused mindset that characterized her best performances. Whatever challenges lay ahead in Richmond, she was finally going to have the chance to prove that her place on the HRT was based on merit rather than politics. The Tactical Operations Center buzzed with controlled urgency as Sarah entered, her equipment bag slung over her shoulder and her mind already focused on the mission ahead. Large displays showed satellite imagery of the Richmond Federal Courthouse, detailed building schematics, and real-time intelligence feeds from local law enforcement agencies. Rodriguez stood at the center of the activity, coordinating preparations with the kind of intensity that had made him a legend in federal law enforcement circles. His expression when he saw Sarah enter was a masterclass in controlled fury, the kind of look that suggested career-ending conversations would be happening once the immediate crisis was resolved. But with Deputy Director Walsh's direct intervention, he had no choice but to integrate Sarah into the operational team. "Agent Chen," he said through gritted teeth, "you'll be providing communication support during the operation. Monitor radio traffic, coordinate with local agencies, and ensure information flow remains clear and accurate." Sarah nodded professionally, though she understood the subtext. Communication support was a vital but supporting role, keeping her away from direct tactical operations, while technically fulfilling Walsh's directive to include her on the team. Rodriguez was managing her assignment in a way that minimized her potential impact, while avoiding direct insubordination. The briefing that followed was a masterclass in tactical planning. The hostage takers had seized control of the courthouse. During afternoon proceedings, trapping approximately 30 civilians and court personnel inside the building. Initial intelligence suggested 3 armed subjects with unknown motivations and uncertain psychological profiles. Local SWAT teams had established a perimeter, but lacked the specialized equipment and training necessary for a complex federal building assault. Agent Thomas Carter, the team's senior tactical operator, outlined the planned approach. Primary entry through the main courthouse entrance, secondary team through the rear service corridors. The building's security systems have been compromised, so we'll be operating with limited electronic surveillance. Visual confirmation of hostage locations will be critical before we initiate any assault procedures. Sarah studied the building schematics with growing concern. The courthouse was a complex structure with multiple levels, numerous potential hiding places, and architectural features that would complicate any rescue attempt. The hostage takers had chosen their location well, maximizing their defensive advantages while limiting law enforcement options. "Sir," she said during a brief pause in the briefing, "the building's ventilation system might provide additional reconnaissance opportunities. If we could insert fiber optic cameras through the air ducts, we might gain visual confirmation of hostage positions without alerting the subjects." Rodriguez's expression suggested he'd prefer her observations remain unvoiced, but Carter nodded thoughtfully. "Interesting point. Do we have the necessary equipment available?" "Standard surveillance package includes fiber optic systems suitable for that application," Sarah replied. "The courthouse blueprints show accessible ductwork on the second floor. That could provide sightlines into the main courtroom area." Carter made a note on his tactical planning sheet. "We'll include that option in our approach." "Good thinking, Chen." The acknowledgement was brief but significant. Sarah's suggestion had been operationally relevant and tactically sound, exactly the kind of contribution she'd been hoping to make. Rodriguez's expression suggested he found her input irritating rather than valuable, but other team members were beginning to take notice of her analytical capabilities. The helicopter flight to Richmond took 45 minutes, during which Sarah reviewed intelligence reports and monitored communications traffic from local agencies. The hostage situation was evolving rapidly, with conflicting reports about the subjects' demands and uncertain information about their psychological states. What was clear was that time was running out for a peaceful resolution. Agent Kim, who had been assigned to the secondary assault team, leaned over during the flight to speak quietly with Sarah. Rodriguez isn't happy about Walsh's intervention, but the rest of the team is starting to recognize your capabilities. Keep demonstrating value, and opinions will start to change. Sarah appreciated the encouragement, though she understood that one operation wouldn't erase 6 months of systematic exclusion. Rodriguez's resistance appeared to be rooted in fundamental assumptions about her suitability for elite law enforcement, and those assumptions wouldn't change easily. As they approached the Richmond landing zone, Sarah could see the scale of the law enforcement response. Local police, federal agents, emergency medical personnel, and media representatives had created a massive perimeter around the courthouse. The situation had clearly escalated beyond local capabilities, justifying the HRT's deployment. The command post had been established in a mobile operations center 3 blocks from the courthouse, equipped with sophisticated communications equipment and tactical planning resources. Rodriguez immediately began coordinating with local incident commanders while the tactical teams prepared their equipment for the approaching operation. Sarah was assigned to the communications station, where she began monitoring multiple radio frequencies and coordinating information flow between various agencies. The work was demanding and critical, requiring her to track dozens of simultaneous conversations, while filtering relevant intelligence for the tactical teams. Within minutes, she'd identified several communication gaps that were hampering coordination efforts. Local police units were using different radio protocols than federal agencies, creating confusion about perimeter assignments and crowd control responsibilities. She quickly established bridge communications that allowed seamless information sharing between all involved agencies. "Excellent work on the communications coordination," said Agent Williams, the team's intelligence specialist. "Your language skills are proving valuable for coordinating with some of the federal marshal units that include officers from various backgrounds." Sarah's multilingual capabilities were indeed proving useful as she translated communications and facilitated coordination between agencies with diverse personnel. These were exactly the kinds of specialized skills that should have made her invaluable to the HRT, though Rodriguez continued to treat her contributions as fortunate coincidences, rather than examples of professional competence. As the afternoon progressed, intelligence gathering revealed increasingly concerning details about the hostage situation. The subjects appeared to be motivated by anti-government sentiments and had specifically chosen the federal courthouse as a symbolic target. They were demanding media attention for their political grievances and threatening violence if their demands weren't met within specific time frames. "We're looking at a deadline situation," Carter announced during a tactical briefing. "The subjects have given us until 8 o'clock tonight to arrange a live television broadcast of their political statement. After that, they're threatening to begin executing hostages." Sarah studied the intelligence reports while monitoring communications traffic. Something about the subjects' behavior patterns didn't align with typical hostage-taking scenarios. Their demands were politically motivated but operationally naive, suggesting limited experience with law enforcement negotiations. That inexperience could make them more dangerous, as unpredictable actions were often more difficult to counter than professional criminal behavior. "The subject's communication patterns suggest psychological instability," she observed during the briefing. "Their demands are escalating in scope while their negotiation tactics remain simplistic. That combination often indicates increasing desperation and reduced impulse control." Rodriguez looked up from his tactical planning with clear irritation. "Agent Chen, your role is communication support, not psychological profiling. Please focus on your assigned responsibilities." The dismissal was sharp and public, clearly intended to keep Sarah in her assigned lane rather than encouraging broader contributions. However, Agent Williams nodded thoughtfully at her observations, suggesting that other team members were beginning to value her analytical insights regardless of Rodriguez's resistance. As evening approached, the tactical situation became increasingly urgent. Negotiations had stalled, the subjects were becoming more agitated, and intelligence suggested they were serious about their deadline threats. The HRT would need to execute a rescue operation that saved 30 hostages while neutralizing multiple armed subjects in a complex federal building. Sarah monitored communications traffic as final preparations were completed, noting increasing stress in the voices of local law enforcement personnel and growing tension among the tactical teams. This was the kind of high-stakes operation that defined careers and determined whether months of training translated into operational success. At 7:30, Rodriguez made the final decision. We're moving in. Alpha Team takes primary entry. Bravo Team secures secondary routes, and Communications Team coordinates all agency traffic during the operation. Sarah's role would keep her in the command post during the assault, monitoring radio traffic and ensuring information flow remained clear during the chaos of tactical operations. It was critical work that could determine the success or failure of the entire mission, though she couldn't help wishing she was part of the direct action teams entering the building. As the tactical teams moved toward their assault positions, Sarah's communications station became the nerve center for the entire operation. Radio traffic increased exponentially as teams reported their movements, obstacles, and tactical discoveries. She filtered information, relayed critical updates, and maintained coordination between multiple agencies while the operation unfolded in real time. The assault began at exactly 8 o'clock as HRT teams breached the courthouse through multiple entry points. Sarah tracked their progress through radio communications, noting their systematic advancement through the building's complex layout. The fiber optic surveillance system she'd suggested was providing valuable intelligence about hostage locations and subject movements. Alpha Team, be advised that thermal imaging shows 3 subjects on the 2nd floor, approximately 20 hostages in the main courtroom, she relayed, coordinating information from multiple surveillance sources. Copy that. Communications. Visual confirmation matches thermal data. Preparing to engage subjects while securing hostage safety. The operation proceeded with mechanical precision as the tactical teams neutralized the armed subjects and secured the hostages. Sarah coordinated emergency medical response for several injured civilians while maintaining communications between assault teams and command personnel. The entire operation concluded within 18 minutes with all hostages safely rescued and the subjects apprehended. As tactical teams began their post-operation procedures, Sarah remained at her communications station, coordinating debriefing interviews and ensuring all agencies had the information they needed for their reports. The successful conclusion of the operation represented a textbook example of federal law enforcement cooperation and tactical excellence. Agent Carter approached her station as the immediate crisis concluded, his expression reflecting a mixture of exhaustion and satisfaction. Outstanding communications work. Chen, your coordination prevented several potential problems, and your intelligence suggestions proved operationally valuable. Sarah appreciated the recognition, though she understood that one successful operation wouldn't immediately change Rodriguez's assessment of her capabilities. As the team prepared for the return flight to Quantico, she could see him conducting debriefing conversations with other agents while pointedly excluding her from the discussions. The helicopter flight back to Virginia gave Sarah time to reflect on the day's events. She'd finally been given the opportunity to contribute to a real HRT operation, and her performance had been exemplary. Her communications work had been critical to the mission's success, and her tactical suggestions had proven valuable to the assault teams. Most importantly, she demonstrated that her skills translated effectively from training scenarios to actual operational situations. However, she also understood that Rodriguez's resistance to her presence on the team remained unchanged. If anything, her successful performance seemed to irritate him further, as if her competence challenged his assumptions about her suitability for elite law enforcement work. As they touched down at Quantico, Sarah gathered her equipment with a renewed sense of determination. She'd proven herself under operational conditions and demonstrated value to the team in measurable ways. Whether that would be enough to overcome institutional resistance remained to be seen, but she'd taken an important step toward earning the respect she'd been seeking. The debriefing session that followed would determine whether her operational success translated into expanded opportunities, or whether Rodriguez would find new ways to limit her participation in future missions. Either way, Sarah Chen had tasted what she'd been working toward for 6 months, and she wasn't prepared to accept anything less than full integration into the team she'd proven herself worthy of joining. The days following the Richmond operation brought a subtle but noticeable shift in the dynamics at Quantico. Sarah's successful performance during the hostage rescue had generated positive attention from senior FBI officials and recognition from her tactical teammates. For the first time since joining the HRT, she found herself included in informal conversations and invited to participate in advanced training scenarios. Agent Carter had specifically requested her participation in a complex counterterrorism exercise scheduled for the following week, noting that her analytical skills and communication abilities would enhance the training value for all participants. Other team members were beginning to seek her input on tactical problems and include her in the kind of professional discussions that built trust and mutual respect. However, Rodriguez's attitude remained unchanged, if anything becoming more entrenched in response to the external pressure he was receiving to integrate Sarah more fully into the team. During team meetings, he continued to minimize her contributions and assign her to support roles that kept her away from primary tactical operations. His resistance had evolved from casual dismissal to active opposition, suggesting that external intervention was only strengthening his determination to limit her influence. The breaking point came during a routine training briefing when Deputy Director Walsh made an unannounced visit to observe HRT training protocols. Sarah was conducting a communications drill with several junior agents when Walsh entered the training facility, accompanied by FBI Deputy Assistant Director Michael Brooks, who oversaw tactical operations at the national level. Rodriguez immediately approached the visiting officials with the kind of deference that senior agents reserve for career-making conversations. Deputy Director Walsh, Director Brooks, welcome to our training facility. We're conducting advanced tactical scenarios that demonstrate our operational readiness. Walsh nodded politely, but her attention was focused on the communications exercise Sarah was leading. The drill involved coordinating multiple agency responses to a simulated terrorist incident, requiring participants to manage complex information flows while maintaining situational awareness. Sarah was demonstrating exactly the kind of multitasking capabilities and leadership potential that the HRT needed to develop. Agent Chen, Walsh called out as the exercise concluded. Could you brief us on the communications protocols you were just demonstrating? Sarah stepped forward confidently, outlining the coordination procedures and explaining how effective information management could prevent the kind of agency confusion that had historically complicated multi-jurisdictional operations. Her briefing was clear, comprehensive, and demonstrated deep understanding of both tactical requirements and bureaucratic challenges. Brooks listened intently, occasionally asking questions that revealed his appreciation for the complexities Sarah was addressing. These protocols could be valuable for other HRT units, he observed. Have you considered developing a training curriculum that could be implemented more broadly? The suggestion represented exactly the kind of career-advancing opportunity that Sarah had been hoping for. A chance to contribute to HRT operations at a systemic level while demonstrating her value to the organization. Rodriguez's expression suggested he found the conversation deeply troubling, though he maintained professional composure in front of senior officials. Agent Chen has been focused on completing her foundational training, Rodriguez interjected. While her communications work is competent, advanced curriculum development requires operational experience that takes time to develop. Walsh's expression hardened slightly at Rodriguez's intervention. Team leader Rodriguez. Agent Chen's performance during the Richmond operation suggests she's progressed well beyond foundational training. Her contributions were specifically cited in the after-action reports as operationally critical. The tension between Walsh and Rodriguez was becoming visible, suggesting that Sarah's situation had evolved beyond individual performance issues into questions about leadership and organizational culture. Rodriguez was being challenged not just on his assessment of Sarah's capabilities, but on his approach to team development and talent utilization. "Ma'am," Rodriguez replied carefully, "operational success requires consistent performance across multiple scenarios. Single operations, while important, don't necessarily indicate readiness for expanded responsibilities." Sarah found herself in the uncomfortable position of being discussed as if she weren't present, while senior officials debated her qualifications and readiness for advancement. The conversation was revealing institutional tensions that extended far beyond her individual situation, touching on broader questions about how the FBI developed and utilized diverse talent. Brooks stepped forward, his expression suggesting important decisions were being made. Team leader Rodriguez. "I'm authorizing Agent Chen's participation in next month's joint operations exercise with international counterterrorism units. Her language skills and analytical capabilities will be valuable for coordinating with foreign law enforcement agencies." The assignment was significant both operationally and symbolically. Joint international exercises were reserved for the FBI's most capable agents, representing the United States in cooperative law enforcement efforts with allied nations. Rodriguez's expression suggested he viewed the assignment as unwelcome external interference in his personnel decisions. "Sir," Rodriguez said, his voice carrying a subtle edge of protest, "international operations require agents with extensive experience in cross-cultural communications and diplomatic protocols. Agent Chen's training in these areas has been limited." Sarah felt a surge of frustration at Rodriguez's continued resistance, but understood that challenging him directly in front of senior officials would be professionally damaging. Instead, she waited for Walsh or Brooks to respond to his objections, hoping that her demonstrated competence would speak for itself. "Actually," Sarah said carefully, "my graduate work included extensive study of international law enforcement cooperation, and my language capabilities include diplomatic-level fluency in Mandarin and intermediate conversational ability in French and German. I believe those qualifications align well with the exercise requirements." Her intervention was measured but firm, providing factual information that countered Rodriguez's objections without directly challenging his assessment. Brooks nodded approvingly at her response, while Walsh's expression suggested satisfaction with Sarah's professional handling of a delicate situation. "Excellent," Brooks concluded. "Agent Chen, you'll receive detailed briefing materials next week. This exercise will provide valuable experience in international cooperation protocols." As the senior officials departed, Rodriguez's expression shifted to barely controlled anger. Sarah had been assigned to a prestigious international operation. Despite his objections, and the intervention had occurred in front of witnesses who would undoubtedly discuss the encounter with other agents. His authority had been challenged publicly, and his assessment of Sarah's capabilities had been essentially overruled by senior leadership. The remainder of the day passed in tense silence as Rodriguez worked to maintain normal training operations. While processing the implications of the morning's events, Sarah continued her assigned duties with professional focus, but could feel the increased scrutiny from other team members, who understood that significant organizational dynamics were shifting. Agent Kim approached her during the afternoon break, his expression mixing concern with encouragement. "Sarah Rodriguez is not going to let this go easily. He's been challenged publicly, and that's not something he's experienced before." Sarah understood the warning behind Kim's words, but she also recognized that backing down now would signal weakness that Rodriguez could exploit for months to come. The international exercise represented more than just another training opportunity. It was a chance to demonstrate her capabilities on a larger stage while building relationships with agents from other agencies who might provide career opportunities beyond Rodriguez's influence. The following morning brought news that would change everything. Sarah arrived at the facility to find unusual activity in the Tactical Operations Center, with senior agents huddled around communication equipment and intelligence displays. The energy felt similar to the Richmond deployment, suggesting that another real-world situation was developing. Agent Morrison approached as Sarah began her morning equipment checks, her expression mixing excitement with concern. "Sarah, something big is happening. We've got reports of a developing situation that might require HRT response, and Rodriguez is already assembling preliminary team assignments." Sarah felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that accompanied potential operational deployment, though her previous experience suggested she'd likely be excluded from any primary response team. Rodriguez had made it clear that he viewed her Richmond performance as an anomaly rather than evidence of operational readiness. The morning briefing confirmed her suspicions. Rodriguez stood before the assembled agents, his expression grave as he outlined a complex developing situation. Intelligence agencies have identified a potential terrorist cell operating in the VMA, Washington metropolitan area. The subjects appear to be planning an attack on a high-value federal target, though specific details remain unclear. The room fell silent as agents processed the implications. Terrorist operations in the nation's capital represented the highest possible stakes for federal law enforcement, requiring coordination between multiple agencies and flawless execution of counter-terrorism protocols. These were the missions that justified the HRT's existence and tested every aspect of their training. Current intelligence suggests 3 to 5 subjects with sophisticated planning capabilities and access to advanced weapon systems. Rodriguez continued, "Local law enforcement and intelligence agencies are requesting HRT support for surveillance operations and potential tactical intervention." Sarah studied the preliminary intelligence reports being distributed, noting gaps in the information that suggested the situation was still developing rapidly. The subjects' identities remained unclear, their specific targets unknown, and their operational timeline uncertain. These were exactly the kinds of ambiguous circumstances that required analytical capabilities and adaptive thinking. "Team assignments for the surveillance operation will be announced within the hour," Rodriguez stated. "This situation requires our most experienced personnel, as any mistakes could result in catastrophic consequences for national security." The emphasis on most experienced personnel was clearly directed at Sarah, suggesting that her inclusion in the Richmond operation had been an exception rather than a precedent. Rodriguez was reasserting his authority over personnel decisions, while preparing to exclude her from what could be the most significant operation of her career. As agents dispersed to prepare their equipment and review intelligence materials, Sarah remained behind to study the preliminary reports more carefully. Something about the subject's operational patterns reminded her of case studies she'd analyzed during her graduate research, though she couldn't immediately identify the specific connection. Agent Williams approached as she continued her analysis, his expression thoughtful. "Chen, your academic background included terrorism studies, didn't it? I'm seeing some patterns in these intelligence reports that might benefit from analytical expertise." Sarah nodded, grateful for Williams' recognition of her specialized knowledge. "The subject's communication patterns and target selection methods are consistent with certain international terrorist organizations, though the specific indicators are subtle. Williams leaned closer, lowering his voice. What kind of indicators? The timing of their communications, the geographic distribution of their activities, and the symbolic significance of their apparent target selection, Sarah replied. These patterns suggest training or guidance from organizations with extensive operational experience. Williams made notes as Sarah outlined her observations, recognizing the potential value of her analysis for understanding the developing threat. Her academic research had focused specifically on how international terrorist organizations adapted their methods for operations in different cultural and political environments. You should brief Rodriguez on these observations, Williams suggested. This kind of analytical insight could be critical for developing effective counter-strategies. Sarah appreciated Williams' encouragement, though she doubted Rodriguez would welcome her input regardless of its potential value. His resistance to her participation had become increasingly personal, suggesting that professional considerations were secondary to his determination to limit her influence within the team. The tactical planning session began an hour later, with Rodriguez outlining surveillance assignments and coordination protocols for monitoring the suspected terrorist cell. Sarah listened carefully, noting that the planned approach focused primarily on physical surveillance, while giving limited attention to the analytical work that could help predict the subject's next moves. "Sir," she said during a brief pause. In the briefing, the subject's operational patterns suggest they may be following specific protocols developed by international organizations. If we could identify which protocols they're using, we might be able to anticipate their target selection and timing. Rodriguez's expression hardened at her intervention. Agent Chen, this operation requires focus on tactical surveillance, not theoretical analysis. Your role will be providing communications support from the command post. The assignment was identical to her Richmond role, keeping her away from direct operational activities while technically fulfilling any requirements for her participation. Sarah felt the familiar frustration of being relegated to support functions, despite her specialized qualifications for the analytical work the operation clearly needed. Agent Carter, who had worked with Sarah during the Richmond operation, stepped forward with a thoughtful expression. "Actually, sir, Agent Chen's analytical observations about the subject's patterns could enhance our surveillance effectiveness. If she's correct about international training protocols, that information could help us position our teams more strategically." Rodriguez's jaw tightened at Carter's support for Sarah's participation, suggesting that other team members were beginning to recognize her value despite his continued resistance. The dynamic was creating visible tension within the leadership structure, as experienced agents found themselves caught between their team leaders' preferences and their professional assessment of operational needs. "Agent Carter," Rodriguez replied sharply, "tactical decisions are my responsibility. Agent Chen will provide communication support, and that assignment will remain unchanged." The finality in Rodriguez's voice effectively ended discussion, though Sarah could see several agents exchanging glances that suggested private conversations would be happening later. Her exclusion from analytical work was becoming increasingly difficult to justify as her expertise became more obviously relevant to operational success. As teams prepared for deployment, Sarah established her communications station in the mobile command post, where she would monitor radio traffic and coordinate information flow between surveillance teams and intelligence agencies. The work was critical but frustrating, as she could contribute far more value through direct analytical support. The surveillance operation began that afternoon, with multiple teams positioning themselves around locations where the suspected terrorist cell had been observed. Sarah tracked their movements through radio communications while coordinating with FBI intelligence analysts, who were attempting to develop more detailed profiles of the subjects. Within hours, patterns began emerging that confirmed Sarah's initial observations. The subjects were indeed following sophisticated operational protocols that suggested extensive training and professional guidance. Their communication methods, movement patterns, and security precautions reflected knowledge that exceeded typical domestic extremist capabilities. "Command, this is Surveillance Team Alpha," came a radio transmission. "Subjects are utilizing counter-surveillance techniques that suggest advanced training. They're varying their routes, using communication protocols that indicate operational sophistication." Sarah immediately recognized the significance of the report as it confirmed her analysis of the subject's international connections. She quickly compiled additional intelligence information that supported the field observations, preparing a briefing that could help teams adjust their surveillance strategies. "Sir," she radioed to Rodriguez, "the field reports are confirming analytical indicators of international training protocols. I have additional intelligence that could enhance our surveillance positioning." Rodriguez's response was curt and dismissive. "Agent Chen, maintain your communications responsibilities. Analytical assessments will be handled through appropriate channels." The rebuff was professionally devastating, as Sarah watched an opportunity to provide critical operational intelligence being dismissed for reasons that had nothing to do with mission effectiveness. Her specialized knowledge was being wasted while field teams struggled with subjects whose behavior patterns she could help them understand. Agent Williams, who was monitoring intelligence communications from the command post, approached Sarah's station with obvious frustration. "Chen, your analysis is spot on. The subjects are definitely using international protocols, and our surveillance teams could benefit from understanding those patterns better." Sarah appreciated Williams' validation, though she understood that his support couldn't overcome Rodriguez's systematic exclusion of her contributions. The operation was proceeding without the analytical enhancement that her expertise could provide, potentially compromising its effectiveness for reasons entirely unrelated to operational requirements. As evening approached, the surveillance teams reported increasingly concerning developments. The subjects were conducting what appeared to be final reconnaissance of multiple potential targets, suggesting that their operational timeline was accelerating. The window for preventive intervention was narrowing rapidly. "All teams, this is command," Rodriguez announced over the radio. "Intelligence indicates the subjects may be moving to operational phase within the next 24 hours. Enhanced surveillance protocols are now in effect." Sarah monitored the tactical communications while analyzing intelligence reports that were streaming in from multiple agencies. The subjects' behavior patterns were becoming increasingly urgent, and their target selection appeared to be focusing on symbolic federal installations that would maximize political impact. Her academic research had included extensive study of how terrorist organizations selected targets for maximum psychological effect, and the developing intelligence suggested the subjects were following those exact protocols. She'd written her master's thesis on terrorist target selection methodologies, specifically analyzing how international organizations trained operatives to identify vulnerabilities in federal security systems. "Williams," she called quietly, "the subject's reconnaissance patterns are consistent with specific target selection protocols used by Middle Eastern terrorist organizations. If they're following those methodologies, I can predict which facilities they're most likely to target." Williams immediately understood the significance of her observation. "Can you narrow down the probable targets based on their reconnaissance activities?" Sarah quickly reviewed the surveillance reports, comparing the subject's movements with her knowledge of terrorist target selection criteria. Based on their reconnaissance patterns, they're most likely targeting either the Federal Reserve Building or the main Justice Department facility. Both locations offer the symbolic value and security vulnerabilities that match their operational profile. Williams nodded grimly, recognizing that Sarah's analysis could provide exactly the intelligence breakthrough the operation needed. "Rodriguez needs to hear this immediately." They approached Rodriguez's position in the command post, where he was coordinating with FBI intelligence officials about the developing threat assessment. Williams waited for a pause in the conversation before speaking. "Sir, Agent Chen has developed analytical intelligence about probable target selection based on the subject's reconnaissance patterns. Her assessment could help us focus our protective resources more effectively." Rodriguez turned toward them with obvious irritation at the interruption. "Agent Williams, I've made it clear that analytical assessments are being handled through established intelligence channels. Agent Chen's role is communication support." Williams persisted despite Rodriguez's dismissal. "Sir, her academic expertise in terrorist target selection methodologies is directly relevant to this operational situation. She's identified specific patterns that could predict the subject's next moves." Sarah stepped forward, recognizing that this might be her only opportunity to contribute her specialized knowledge to the operation. "Sir, the subject's reconnaissance activities are following documented protocols used by international terrorist organizations for target selection in urban environments. Based on those patterns, I can identify the two most probable targets." Rodriguez's expression shifted to barely controlled anger at her persistence. "Agent Chen, you are exceeding your assigned responsibilities. Return to your communications station immediately and limit your activities to radio monitoring." The public rebuke was harsh and professionally damaging, delivered in front of multiple agents and intelligence officials who were witnessing Rodriguez's rejection of potentially critical operational intelligence. Sarah felt her cheeks burning with embarrassment and frustration, but she understood that pushing further would constitute insubordination. As she returned to her communication station, Sarah could hear Rodriguez explaining to the intelligence officials that analytical assessments would be provided through appropriate FBI intelligence channels. He was effectively dismissing her expertise while committing to alternative analytical resources that might not be available quickly enough to prevent the subjects from executing their planned attack. Agent Carter approached her station a few minutes later, his expression mixing sympathy with professional concern. "Chen, your analysis sounds credible, and we might not have time to wait for formal intelligence assessments. Can you document your observations so they can be reviewed if circumstances change?" Sarah appreciated Carter's pragmatic approach, understanding that he was creating an unofficial pathway for her intelligence to reach decision-makers if the operational situation deteriorated. She quickly prepared a detailed analytical brief, outlining her assessment of the subject's target selection methodology and her prediction of their most probable objectives. "The subjects are following a specific protocol that prioritizes symbolic value over tactical vulnerability," she wrote. "Their reconnaissance pattern indicates focus on targets that offer maximum political impact while remaining operationally achievable. Based on documented international terrorist methodologies, the Federal Reserve Building represents their most probable primary target." The brief included detailed reasoning supporting her conclusion, with references to specific patterns observed in the surveillance reports and connections to documented terrorist operational procedures. It was the kind of analytical product that FBI intelligence units typically produced, though her specialized academic background allowed her to identify patterns that might be missed by generalist analysts. As night fell, the surveillance teams reported that the subjects had returned to their suspected safe house, suggesting they were completing final preparations for their planned operation. The intelligence indicated they would likely move to execution phase within the next 12 to 18 hours, creating an urgent need for preventive action. Rodriguez announced over the tactical communications network that enhanced security measures were being implemented at multiple federal facilities based on general threat assessments. However, the protective resources were being distributed broadly rather than concentrated on the specific targets that Sarah's analysis had identified as most probable. Sarah monitored the tactical communications while reviewing additional intelligence reports that continued to support her analytical conclusions. The subject's behavior patterns remained consistent with her assessment, though the operational teams were proceeding without the benefit of her specialized insights. Agent Williams approached her station again around midnight, his expression troubled. "Chen, new intelligence is coming in that supports your target selection analysis, but Rodriguez is committed to the broader security approach. Do you still believe the Federal Reserve Building is the primary target?" Sarah reviewed the latest intelligence reports before responding. "Everything I'm seeing continues to support that assessment." The subject's reconnaissance focused heavily on that facility, and their operational timeline suggests they'll move tomorrow morning when maximum symbolic impact can be achieved. Williams nodded grimly, understanding the implications. "If you're correct, the distributed security approach might not provide adequate protection for the most likely target." The conversation was interrupted by an urgent radio transmission from one of the surveillance teams. "Command, this is Team Bravo. Subjects are showing signs of increased activity at the safe house. Vehicle movements and communication spikes suggest possible preparation for imminent operations." Rodriguez immediately began coordinating enhanced surveillance protocols while confirming that security measures were in place at potential target locations. Sarah listened to the communications traffic while analyzing the developing situation, recognizing that the subjects were indeed moving toward operational execution. Her specialized knowledge of terrorist operational timelines suggested that the subjects would likely conduct their attack during morning hours when federal facilities would be most crowded with employees and visitors. The timing would maximize both symbolic impact and potential casualties, consistent with international terrorist methodologies. "Williams," she said quietly, "if I'm correct about their target selection and timing, the attack will occur during morning rush hour at the Federal Reserve Building. That facility needs concentrated security enhancement immediately." Williams understood the urgency of her assessment, but also recognized that overriding Rodriguez's security dispositions would require intervention from higher authorities. "Sarah, I believe your analysis is correct, but implementing changes at this point would require convincing people who might not be receptive to your input." Sarah felt the weight of professional responsibility pressing against the institutional barriers that were preventing her from contributing effectively to the operation. She possessed specialized knowledge that could potentially save lives, but organizational dynamics were limiting her ability to influence critical decisions. As the night progressed, intelligence continued to accumulate that supported Sarah's analytical conclusions while the operational teams maintained their broadly distributed security approach. The gap between her assessment and the implemented strategy was creating exactly the kind of vulnerability that sophisticated terrorist operations were designed to exploit. By dawn, Sarah had documented comprehensive analytical intelligence supporting her assessment that the Federal Reserve Building represented the subject's primary target. Her analysis included detailed reasoning based on terrorist operational methodologies, specific patterns observed in surveillance reports, and intelligence indicators that collectively pointed toward a coordinated attack during morning hours. The question was whether institutional resistance to her participation would prevent that intelligence from reaching decision-makers before the subjects executed their planned operation. Sarah understood that professional careers were measured by contributions during critical moments, and this situation represented exactly the kind of opportunity where specialized expertise could make a decisive difference. The morning brought confirmation that Sarah's worst fears were becoming reality. At 7:30, surveillance teams reported that the subjects had left their safe house with equipment packages and were moving toward downtown Washington in separate vehicles. The attack was beginning, and the distributed security measures might not be adequate to prevent it. Rodriguez's voice crackled over the radio with urgent coordination instructions. "All teams, subjects are mobile and moving toward target area. Enhanced security protocols are in effect at all federal facilities. Maintain surveillance distance and prepare for possible tactical intervention. Sarah monitored the communications while tracking the subject's movements on tactical displays. Their route was indeed leading toward the Federal Reserve Building, exactly as her analysis had predicted. However, security resources were distributed among multiple facilities rather than concentrated where they were most likely needed. Agent Carter approached her communication station with obvious concern. "Chen, the subject's movements are confirming your target analysis. Is there anything else your expertise suggests we should be watching for?" Sarah quickly reviewed the tactical situation through the lens of her specialized knowledge. Based on international terrorist protocols, they'll likely conduct a final reconnaissance pass before initiating their attack. That reconnaissance will reveal the current security posture and allow them to adjust their approach accordingly. Carter nodded, understanding the tactical implications. So we might have a brief window where enhanced surveillance could provide intelligence about their specific attack methodology. Exactly, Sarah confirmed. Their reconnaissance behavior will indicate whether they're planning a vehicle-borne attack, pedestrian assault, or some combination of methodologies. That information could be critical for implementing effective countermeasures. Carter immediately radioed the observation to the tactical teams, providing them with analytical guidance about what to watch for during the subject's approach to their target. Sarah felt a surge of satisfaction at finally being able to contribute her expertise to the operational effort, even if the contribution was coming through informal channels. The surveillance teams quickly confirmed Carter's intelligence, REPORTING, that the subjects were indeed conducting careful reconnaissance of the Federal Reserve Building's security posture. Their behavior patterns suggested they were evaluating current protective measures and planning their approach based on observed vulnerabilities. "Command, this is Team Alpha," came an urgent radio transmission. "Subjects have completed reconnaissance and are positioning for what appears to be a coordinated assault. Multiple approach vectors suggest sophisticated planning and possible diversionary tactics." Sarah recognized the tactical indicators being described by the surveillance teams, as they matched documented patterns used by international terrorist organizations for attacks on fortified targets. Her academic research had included detailed study of how these organizations coordinated multi-vector assaults to overwhelm security measures. "Williams," she called urgently, "the subjects are implementing a documented attack protocol used by Al-Qaeda affiliates for assaults on government facilities. The reconnaissance phase will be followed by diversionary activity designed to draw security resources away from their primary assault vector." Williams immediately understood the significance of her analysis, which means the main attack will come from whichever direction receives the least security attention during the diversionary phase. Sarah nodded grimly, recognizing that the subject's sophisticated planning might overwhelm security measures that hadn't been designed to counter international-level terrorist tactics. The diversionary attack will likely target the main entrance where security is most visible, while the primary assault comes through service areas or secondary access points. Williams quickly radioed the assessment to Rodriguez, emphasizing that Sarah's specialized knowledge was providing critical intelligence about the subject's likely attack methodology. The information could enable security teams to position themselves more effectively and prevent the attack from succeeding. Rodriguez's response was swift and decisive, though it focused on tactical countermeasures rather than acknowledging the source of the analytical intelligence. "All security teams prepare for diversionary tactics followed by primary assault through secondary access points. Enhance coverage of service areas and employee entrances." Sarah felt a mixture of satisfaction and frustration as she heard her analytical insights being implemented through the tactical communications network. Her specialized expertise was finally influencing operational decisions, though Rodriguez was carefully avoiding any acknowledgement of her contributions. The attack began at 8:15 with a vehicle approaching the Federal Reserve buildings. Main entrance at high speed. Security teams immediately responded to the apparent threat, focusing their attention on the primary access point while maintaining awareness of other potential approaches. Sarah monitored the tactical communications while analyzing the developing situation through her understanding of terrorist operational protocols. Williams, this is definitely the diversionary phase. The primary assault will begin within the next 60 seconds through one of the secondary access points. Williams relayed the warning to the tactical teams, who immediately shifted resources to cover service entrances and employee access areas. The repositioning proved critical when a second team of subjects attempted to breach the building through a loading dock area that had been receiving reduced security attention. Contact. Secondary assault team engaging subjects at loading dock entrance. Came an urgent radio transmission. Multiple subjects with automatic weapons attempting forced entry. The tactical engagement was brief but intense as security teams utilized the enhanced positioning that Sarah's analysis had recommended. The subjects were neutralized before they could penetrate the building's security perimeter, and the diversionary vehicle was safely intercepted without casualties among security personnel. Rodriguez's voice filled the communications network as the immediate threat was contained. All teams, subjects have been neutralized and facility security is confirmed. Excellent work by all personnel involved in this operation. Sarah felt a profound sense of relief that the attack had been prevented and that her analytical contributions had helped save lives. However, she also recognized that Rodriguez's summary of the operation made no mention of the specialized intelligence that had enabled the successful defensive positioning. Agent Carter approached her communication station as post-incident procedures began, his expression reflecting both exhaustion and gratitude. "Chen, your analysis was absolutely critical to preventing this attack. The security teams were positioned exactly where they needed to be because of your insights into terrorist operational protocols." Sarah appreciated Carter's recognition, though she understood that the official after-action reports might not reflect her analytical contributions. Rodriguez had consistently minimized her role throughout the operation, and that pattern was unlikely to change during the formal documentation process. Deputy Director Walsh arrived at the command post within an hour of the incident's conclusion, accompanied by senior FBI officials who were conducting preliminary assessments of the operation's success. Sarah continued monitoring communications equipment while preparing detailed reports about the intelligence coordination that had supported the tactical response. "Agent Chen," Walsh called out as she reviewed operational summaries, "I understand. Your analytical expertise contributed significantly to identifying the subject's target and attack methodology. Can you brief me on your assessment process?" Sarah stepped forward confidently, recognizing another opportunity to demonstrate her value to senior FBI leadership. "Ma'am, the subjects were following documented protocols used by international terrorist organizations for attacks on fortified government facilities. By identifying which protocols they were using, we could predict their target selection and tactical approach." Walsh listened intently as Sarah outlined her analytical methodology, occasionally asking questions that revealed her appreciation for the specialized expertise that had enhanced the operation's effectiveness. The briefing demonstrated exactly the kind of analytical capabilities that the FBI needed to counter sophisticated terrorist threats. "Outstanding work, Agent Chen," Walsh concluded. "This kind of analytical enhancement could be valuable for other HRT operations. I'm recommending you for accelerated advancement to senior analytical positions within our counterterrorism units." The recommendation represented a significant career advancement opportunity, potentially moving Sarah beyond Rodriguez's influence while recognizing her specialized contributions to operational success. However, she also understood that such advancement might require leaving the tactical operations work that had originally attracted her to the HRT as the post-incident activities continued throughout the afternoon. Sarah reflected on the complex dynamics that had characterized her 6 months with the hostage rescue team. She'd proven her capabilities repeatedly, contributed critical expertise to successful operations, and demonstrated leadership potential that senior officials were beginning to recognize. Yet Rodriguez's resistance to her participation remained unchanged, suggesting that institutional barriers might prevent her from achieving the operational role she'd originally sought. The choice between accepting analytical positions that recognized her expertise and continuing to fight for tactical opportunities that fulfilled her original goals would define the next phase of her career. The debriefing session that evening would determine whether her operational success translated into expanded opportunities within the HRT or whether she'd need to pursue her career goals through alternative pathways. Either way, Sarah Chen had proven that specialized expertise and determined professionalism could overcome institutional resistance when the stakes were high enough to demand excellence above all other considerations. The debriefing room at Quantico had never felt more charged with tension than it did that evening. Sarah sat across from a panel that included Deputy Director Walsh, Deputy Assistant Director Brooks, Rodriguez, and several senior HRT officials, whose expressions ranged from impressed to deeply uncomfortable. The successful prevention of the terrorist attack had generated significant attention from FBI leadership, but the operational dynamics that had enabled that success were creating institutional questions that went far beyond individual performance. Evaluations. Rodriguez presented his operational summary with characteristic precision, outlining the tactical response that had neutralized the terrorist threat and prevented what could have been a catastrophic attack on federal infrastructure. His report emphasized the coordinated efforts of multiple agencies and the professional excellence of HRT personnel who had executed their duties under extreme pressure. What was notably absent from Rodriguez's summary was any mention of the analytical intelligence that had enabled the tactical teams to position themselves effectively against the subjects' sophisticated attack methodology, the specialized insights that had identified the Federal Reserve building as the primary target and predicted the diversionary tactics were attributed to standard intelligence assessment procedures rather than Sarah's specific expertise. Walsh listened to the briefing with increasing skepticism, occasionally glancing at Sarah with expressions that suggested she was aware of the deliberate omissions in Rodriguez's account. The deputy director had access to detailed communications records that would reveal exactly how the critical intelligence had been developed and disseminated during the Mathavi operation. Team leader Rodriguez, Walsh interrupted during his summary. The after-action communications logs indicate that target identification and tactical methodology predictions were provided through analytical assessment by Agent Chen. Can you explain why those contributions aren't reflected in your operational summary? Rodriguez's jaw tightened slightly at the direct challenge to his characterization of the operation's success. Ma'am, Agent Chen provided communication support during the operation, and her observations were noted along with intelligence from multiple other sources. The tactical success resulted from coordinated efforts across multiple agencies rather than any single analytical contribution. Walsh's expression hardened at Rodriguez's continued minimization of Sarah's role. Team leader, I have detailed communications records that show Agent Chen's analysis correctly identified the subject's target 12 hours before the attack, predicted their tactical methodology with complete accuracy, and provided intelligence that enabled effective security positioning. Those contributions appear to have been operationally critical. The confrontation was becoming increasingly uncomfortable for everyone present, as senior FBI officials witnessed a systematic pattern of credit reassignment that suggested institutional problems extending beyond individual personality conflicts. Rodriguez was being challenged not just on his assessment of Sarah's performance, but on his integrity as a leader. Sarah found herself in the extraordinary position of watching senior FBI officials debate her contributions while she remained professionally silent. The conversation was revealing organizational dynamics that she'd experienced personally, but had never seen addressed at the leadership level. Brooks stepped forward with the kind of authoritative presence that ended debates rather than prolonging them. Team leader Rodriguez, effective leadership requires recognizing and developing talent regardless of personal preferences. Agent Chen's analytical contributions to this operation were documented and measurably significant. Your operational summaries should reflect those contributions accurately. The rebuke was professional, but unmistakable, effectively ordering Rodriguez to revise his characterization of the operation's success. More significantly, it was establishing a pattern of senior leadership intervention that suggested Sarah's situation had attracted attention at the highest levels of FBI management. Rodriguez nodded stiffly, recognizing that continued resistance would constitute insubordination. Yes, sir. I'll revise the operational summary to include all analytical contributions. Walsh stepped forward, her expression suggesting that broader organizational changes were being contemplated. Agent Chen, your performance during both the Richmond hostage rescue and this counterterrorism operation demonstrates exceptional analytical capabilities and operational judgment. Those skills are exactly what the Bureau needs for addressing sophisticated threats to national security. Sarah felt a surge of professional validation, though she remained uncertain about what practical changes might result from the recognition. Senior officials could express appreciation for her contributions, but Rodriguez retained day-to-day authority over her assignments and career development within the HRT. Agent Chen, Brooks continued, I'm authorizing your promotion to Senior Special Agent, effective immediately, along with assignment to lead the Bureau's new counterterrorism analysis unit. You'll have authority to select personnel and develop analytical protocols for supporting HRT operations across all regional offices. The announcement was stunning in both its scope and its implications. Sarah was being promoted beyond Rodriguez's authority while being given leadership responsibility for exactly the kind of analytical work that her specialized expertise was best suited for. The assignment represented recognition not just of her individual capabilities, but of the organizational need for the skills she brought to federal law enforcement. Rodriguez's expression revealed barely controlled shock at the extent of Sarah's advancement, suggesting he hadn't anticipated that his resistance to her participation would result in her promotion beyond his influence. The institutional dynamics that had seemed to favor his position were shifting dramatically in response to demonstrated operational success. Ma'am, Sarah responded professionally, I'm honored by the confidence you're expressing, and I'm prepared to accept the assignment. However, I want to continue participating in HRT tactical operations in addition to my analytical responsibilities. Walsh smiled at Sarah's response, recognizing the determination that had characterized her entire tenure with the organization. Agent Chen, your new position will include tactical liaison responsibilities that will keep you involved in operational planning and execution. You'll be working with HRT teams rather than being excluded from them. The distinction was significant, as it addressed Sarah's desire for continued operational involvement while leveraging her specialized analytical capabilities. She would be advancing professionally without abandoning the tactical work that had originally attracted her to the HRT. Agent Carter stepped forward with obvious satisfaction, recognizing that institutional changes would benefit the entire organization. Senior Special Agent Chen, I look forward to working with your analytical unit on future operations. The enhancement you provided during recent missions has demonstrated the value of specialized intelligence support. Sarah appreciated Carter's public support, understanding that his endorsement carried significant weight with other HRT personnel who might be skeptical of organizational changes. His validation would help establish her credibility in her new leadership role. As the formal debriefing concluded, Rodriguez approached Sarah with an expression that mixed professional resignation with grudging respect. The conversation that followed would determine whether their working relationship could evolve beyond the antagonistic dynamics that had characterized her first 6 months with the organization. "Agent Chen," Rodriguez said quietly, "I owe you an acknowledgement that I've been wrong about your capabilities and contributions. Your performance during recent operations has demonstrated exactly the kind of excellence that the HRT needs." Sarah studied his expression, looking for signs of sincerity behind what could be a politically motivated apology. Rodriguez's resistance to her participation had been systematic and personal, making any change of attitude significant, but potentially temporary. "Thank you for saying that," Sarah replied diplomatically. "I hope we can work together effectively in the future." Rodriguez nodded slowly, recognizing that their professional relationship would need to be rebuilt from scratch. "I'd like to request that your analytical unit provide regular briefings to HRT tactical teams. Your specialized expertise could enhance our operational effectiveness across multiple mission types." The request represented a complete reversal of Rodriguez's previous position, suggesting that institutional pressure and demonstrated operational success had genuinely changed his assessment of Sarah's value. Whether that change would prove lasting remained to be seen, but it created opportunities for positive collaboration. Agent Kim approached as Rodriguez departed, his expression mixing congratulations with amazement at the dramatic changes in organizational dynamics. "Sarah, 6 months ago you were fighting for basic recognition. Now you're leading a new analytical unit and being promoted beyond most agents' career aspirations. It's been incredible to watch." Sarah appreciated Kim's long-standing support, recognizing that his advocacy had provided crucial encouragement during the most difficult periods of her integration into the HRT. His friendship had helped her maintain professional focus when institutional resistance threatened to undermine her confidence. "I couldn't have done this without support from agents like you and Carter," Sarah replied. "The analytical capabilities are only valuable when they're integrated with operational expertise." Kim nodded, understanding that Sarah's success represented broader validation of collaborative approaches to federal law enforcement. Her advancement demonstrated that specialized expertise could enhance rather than threaten traditional tactical operations. The following weeks brought rapid changes as Sarah established her counterterrorism analysis unit and began developing protocols for supporting HRT operations nationwide. Her first priority was recruiting analytical personnel with diverse expertise in international terrorism, criminal psychology, and technological threats that were becoming increasingly sophisticated. Agent Williams accepted her invitation to join the unit as deputy director, bringing his intelligence background and operational experience to support the analytical mission. His participation helped establish credibility with HRT personnel who might be skeptical of purely academic approaches to tactical intelligence. "Sarah," Williams said during their first operational planning session, "we have an opportunity to demonstrate how analytical enhancement can improve HRT effectiveness across the entire spectrum of federal law enforcement missions. The success of our unit will be measured by the operational improvements we can document." Sarah understood that her leadership would be evaluated based on measurable contributions to HRT mission success rather than administrative efficiency or bureaucratic compliance. The analytical unit needed to prove its value through enhanced operational outcomes that justified the organizational resources being invested. The unit's first major assignment came within a month, as intelligence agencies identified a sophisticated cybersecurity threat that combined international coordination with domestic infrastructure targeting. The complexity of the threat required exactly the kind of analytical enhancement that Sarah's unit was designed to provide. The cybersecurity operation demonstrated how analytical intelligence could be integrated with tactical operations to address threats that exceeded traditional law enforcement capabilities. Sarah's team provided real-time analysis of the subject's digital activities, while HRT tactical teams conducted coordinated physical operations against their infrastructure. The operation's success generated attention throughout federal law enforcement, establishing Sarah's unit as a model for how specialized analytical capabilities could enhance tactical effectiveness. Her approach combined academic expertise with operational experience, creating intelligence products that were both theoretically sound and practically applicable. Deputy Director Walsh visited the unit's facilities during the cybersecurity operations conclusion, observing the integrated analytical and tactical coordination that had enabled the mission's success. Her assessment would influence whether similar units would be established at other FBI regional offices. Senior Special Agent Chen, Walsh said during her facility tour, "This unit represents exactly the kind of innovation that modern law enforcement requires. Your integration of analytical expertise with operational support has created capabilities that exceed what either approach could accomplish independently." Sarah felt a profound sense of professional accomplishment, recognizing that her unit had established proof of concept for analytical enhancement of federal tactical operations. The success validated not just her individual capabilities, but the organizational approach that had initially been so controversial. "Ma'am," Sarah replied, "we're demonstrating that diverse expertise can enhance rather than complicate tactical operations when it's properly integrated with operational planning and execution." Walsh nodded approvingly, understanding the broader implications of Sarah's success for FBI organizational development. "I'm recommending expansion of this analytical model to other HRT regional offices, with your unit serving as the training center for analytical personnel nationwide." The expansion assignment represented unprecedented responsibility for Sarah, requiring her to develop training curricula and personnel standards that would affect federal law enforcement capabilities across the entire country. Her individual success was evolving into institutional influence that could affect thousands of agents. Rodriguez approached as Walsh concluded her facility tour, his expression reflecting the professional transformation that had occurred since their initial conflicts. The conversation that followed would demonstrate how much their working relationship had evolved. "Senior Special Agent Chen," Rodriguez said formally, "I want to request analytical support for an upcoming international joint operation with European counter-terrorism units. Your expertise in international operational protocols could be critical for coordination effectiveness." Sarah appreciated Rodriguez's direct acknowledgement of her specialized capabilities, recognizing how significantly his assessment of her value had changed. The request also demonstrated that her analytical unit was becoming integral to HRT operational planning rather than peripheral to it. "I'd be honored to support the international operation," Sarah replied. "My team can provide briefings on European operational protocols and coordinate with international analytical units to enhance intelligence sharing." Rodriguez nodded with obvious satisfaction, recognizing that collaborative approaches were producing better operational outcomes than his previous resistance to analytical integration. "Your unit's support has enhanced every operation we've conducted together. I should have recognized that value much earlier." The acknowledgement was significant, representing genuine professional growth rather than politically motivated accommodation. Rodriguez had evolved from systematic opponent to collaborative partner, demonstrating that institutional change was possible when operational success provided compelling evidence. Agent Carter joined the conversation, his expression reflecting satisfaction with the organizational improvements that Sarah's unit had generated. "The analytical enhancement has transformed how we approach complex operations. We're identifying threats earlier, understanding them better, and responding more effectively." Sarah felt gratitude for the support that agents like Carter and Williams had provided throughout her challenging integration into the HRT. Their advocacy had been crucial during periods when institutional resistance could have ended her career. "The success belongs to the entire team," Sarah replied. "Analytical capabilities are only valuable when they're integrated with operational expertise and tactical experience." Carter smiled at her response, recognizing the collaborative leadership style that had enabled Sarah's unit to achieve acceptance and influence within the traditionally insular HRT culture. That collaborative approach is exactly why the unit has been so successful. The international joint operation that followed demonstrated Sarah's analytical capabilities on a global stage, as her unit coordinated with European intelligence agencies to address a sophisticated terrorist network that spanned multiple countries. The operation required exactly the kind of cross-cultural analytical expertise that her academic background had provided. Sarah's team identified operational patterns that connected seemingly unrelated terrorist activities across 3 European countries, enabling coordinated law enforcement responses that disrupted the network's capabilities. The success generated recognition from international law enforcement agencies and established her unit as a model for analytical cooperation. The operation's conclusion brought a personal milestone that represented the complete transformation of Sarah's professional situation. Rodriguez requested a private meeting to discuss her contributions and their working relationship, a conversation that would have been unimaginable 6 months earlier. "Senior Special Agent Chen," Rodriguez began, "I want to offer a formal apology for my initial resistance to your integration into the HRT. My assessment of your capabilities was wrong, and my approach to your development was counterproductive." Sarah studied his expression, recognizing genuine remorse behind his professional acknowledgement. Rodriguez had undergone a significant transformation that reflected both personal growth and institutional pressure to embrace organizational change. "I appreciate your acknowledgement," Sarah replied diplomatically. "We've both learned from the experience, and our current collaboration is producing excellent operational results." Rodriguez nodded, understanding that their professional relationship had evolved into mutual respect based on demonstrated competence and shared commitment to mission success. "Your analytical unit has become indispensable to her RT operations. I can't imagine conducting complex operations without that kind of analytical support." The transformation was complete, as Rodriguez had evolved from her primary institutional obstacle into one of her strongest advocates within the HRT leadership structure. His change represented broader organizational recognition of the value that diverse expertise brought to federal law enforcement. 6 months later, Sarah stood before a conference of federal law enforcement officials from around the world, presenting the analytical methodologies that her unit had developed for enhancing tactical operations. The presentation represented recognition of her expertise at the highest levels of international law enforcement cooperation. Her unit had grown to include 12 analytical specialists with expertise spanning cybersecurity, international terrorism, criminal psychology, and technological threats. The personnel represented the kind of diverse expertise that modern law enforcement required to address increasingly sophisticated criminal organizations. The integration of analytical capabilities with tactical operations has enhanced our effectiveness across every category of federal law enforcement mission, Sarah explained to the international audience. Specialized expertise can multiply operational capabilities when it's properly coordinated with tactical planning and execution. The presentation generated questions from law enforcement officials representing dozens of countries, all seeking to understand how analytical enhancement could be adapted to their operational requirements. Sarah's approach had become a model for international law enforcement cooperation. Deputy Director Walsh approached after the presentation, her expression reflecting satisfaction with the institutional changes that Sarah's success had generated. "Senior Special Agent Chen, your unit has exceeded every performance metric we established. I'm recommending you for promotion to assistant director level, with responsibility for analytical operations across all FBI tactical units. The promotion represented advancement to senior FBI leadership, with authority spanning multiple organizational divisions and responsibility for thousands of personnel. Sarah would be overseeing analytical support for every tactical operation conducted by the Bureau. "Ma'am," Sarah replied, "I'm honored by your confidence and prepared to accept the expanded responsibilities." Walsh smiled at her response, recognizing the determination and professionalism that had characterized Sarah's entire career with the FBI. "You've demonstrated that excellence can overcome any institutional barrier when it's combined with persistence and integrity." As Sarah reflected on her journey from excluded newcomer to senior FBI leadership, she recognized that her success represented broader validation of the principle that organizations benefited when they evaluated personnel based on capabilities rather than assumptions. Her analytical expertise had enhanced tactical operations, her leadership had developed innovative approaches to complex threats, and her persistence had overcome institutional resistance to change. The ceremony that followed recognized not just Sarah's individual advancement, but the organizational improvements that her unit had generated throughout federal law enforcement. Her success had created opportunities for other agents with diverse expertise, while establishing new standards for analytical support of tactical operations. Rodriguez, now serving as Deputy Assistant Director for HRT Operations, presented Sarah with her new credentials during the promotion ceremony. His participation represented the complete transformation of their professional relationship from antagonistic to collaborative. "Assistant Director Chen," Rodriguez said during the ceremony, "your leadership has enhanced every operation we've conducted together, and your analytical unit has become indispensable to federal tactical operations. The Bureau is fortunate to have your expertise and dedication." Sarah accepted the recognition while acknowledging the colleagues who had supported her throughout the challenging integration process. This success belongs to everyone who believed that diverse expertise could enhance rather than complicate tactical excellence. Agent Kim, now serving as Deputy Director of Sarah's Analytical Division, approached after the ceremony with obvious pride in her advancement. "Sarah, 18 months ago you were fighting for basic recognition. Now you're Assistant Director with authority over analytical operations nationwide. It's been extraordinary to watch your journey." Sarah appreciated Kim's perspective on her career development, recognizing that his support during difficult periods had been crucial for maintaining professional focus. The analytical capabilities were always there. What changed was the institutional willingness to recognize and utilize diverse expertise. Kim nodded, understanding that Sarah's success represented broader organizational evolution that would benefit future agents with specialized capabilities. "Your leadership has created opportunities that didn't exist before." Agent Carter, who had become Sarah's chief tactical liaison, joined the conversation with satisfaction at the organizational improvements that collaborative approaches had generated. "The analytical enhancement has transformed how we approach every type of operation. We're more effective, more efficient, and more successful because of the capabilities your unit provides." Sarah felt gratitude for the support that tactical agents like Carter had provided throughout her integration into HRT operations. Their advocacy had been essential for establishing credibility and demonstrating operational value. The success reflects collaborative teamwork between analytical and tactical personnel, Sarah replied. Neither approach could achieve these results independently. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Agent Morrison, who had been promoted to Deputy Director of Personnel Development based on her advocacy for organizational diversity and inclusion. Her advancement represented institutional recognition of the importance of developing diverse talent within federal law enforcement. "Assistant Director Chen," Morrison said with obvious satisfaction, Your success has created pathways for other agents with specialized expertise. The organizational changes you've generated will benefit federal law enforcement for decades. Sarah understood that her individual advancement represented broader institutional evolution that would affect thousands of future agents. Her success had demonstrated that diverse expertise enhanced rather than threatened tactical excellence when it was properly integrated with operational requirements. The evening reception that followed brought together federal law enforcement officials from across the country, all recognizing the analytical innovations that Sarah's unit had contributed to operational effectiveness. Her approaches were being adopted by tactical units nationwide, multiplying the impact of her specialized expertise. Deputy Assistant Director Brooks approached during the reception, his expression reflecting satisfaction with the organizational improvements that had resulted from embracing analytical enhancement. Assistant Director Chen, your unit has become a model for innovation in federal law enforcement. The capabilities you've developed are enhancing operations at every level of the Bureau. Sarah appreciated the recognition while understanding that her success created responsibilities for continued innovation and improvement. Her leadership position required her to develop new analytical approaches for addressing evolving threats to national security. "Sir," Sarah replied, "we're constantly adapting our analytical methodologies to address new types of threats. The success of our approach depends on continuous learning and improvement." Brooks nodded approvingly at her commitment to ongoing development, recognizing that effective leadership required evolution rather than complacency. That dedication to excellence is exactly why your unit has been so successful. As the reception continued, Sarah reflected on the transformation that had occurred since her arrival at Quantico 18 months earlier. She had evolved from an excluded newcomer struggling for recognition into assistant director with authority over analytical operations nationwide. Her specialized expertise had been transformed from a perceived liability into an organizational asset that enhanced tactical effectiveness. More significantly, her success had created institutional changes that would benefit future agents with diverse capabilities, demonstrating that federal law enforcement could adapt and improve when it embraced rather than resisted innovation. Her analytical unit had become proof that specialized expertise enhanced rather than complicated tactical operations when it was properly integrated with operational planning. The challenges she had overcome represented broader organizational evolution that recognized merit over assumptions, capabilities over preconceptions, and collaborative excellence over institutional resistance to change. Her journey from outsider to leadership had created pathways that would serve federal law enforcement for generations. Rodriguez approached as the reception concluded, his expression reflecting the professional respect that had replaced their initial conflicts. "Assistant Director Chen, it's been an honor to witness your career development and to collaborate with your analytical unit. Your success has made us all better at our jobs." Sarah appreciated the acknowledgement from someone who had initially represented her greatest institutional obstacle, recognizing that their transformed relationship demonstrated the possibility of organizational growth and improvement. Team Leader Rodriguez, our collaboration has produced better operational outcomes than either of us could have achieved independently. Rodriguez smiled at her response, understanding that their professional evolution represented broader institutional learning about the value of diverse expertise and collaborative leadership. Your analytical unit has become integral to everything we do. I can't imagine conducting complex operations without that kind of support. As Sarah departed Quantico that evening, she reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her from excluded newcomer to senior FBI leadership. Her specialized expertise had been recognized and utilized. Her leadership had created organizational improvements, and her persistence had overcome institutional barriers that could have ended her career. The analytical unit she had established was enhancing tactical operations nationwide. Her methodologies were being adopted by federal law enforcement agencies internationally, and her success had created opportunities for future agents with diverse capabilities. Her individual advancement represented broader institutional evolution that would benefit federal law enforcement for decades. Most importantly, Sarah had proven that excellence could overcome institutional resistance when it was combined with persistence, integrity, and collaborative leadership. Her analytical expertise had enhanced rather than threatened tactical operations, demonstrating that diverse capabilities strengthened rather than weakened organizational effectiveness. The journey from fighting for basic recognition to directing analytical operations nationwide had required extraordinary determination, but it had also created lasting changes that would serve federal law enforcement long after her individual career. Sarah Chen had transformed from excluded outsider to institutional leader, proving that merit could overcome prejudice when combined with unwavering commitment to excellence. Her success represented validation of the principle that organizations benefited when they evaluated personnel based on capabilities rather than assumptions, and her leadership had created opportunities that would serve future generations of federal law enforcement professionals. The analytical methodologies she had developed were enhancing tactical operations across the country, multiplying the impact of her specialized expertise far beyond her individual contributions. As she looked toward the future, Sarah understood that her responsibilities had evolved from proving individual worth to developing organizational capabilities that would address emerging threats to national security. Her success had created opportunities for continued innovation and improvement in federal law enforcement analytical operations. The screen in her office suddenly lit up with an urgent priority message: classified, Operation Widowmark, International Counter-Terrorism Coordination required. Report to Strategic Operations Center immediately. Sarah smiled as she read the message, recognizing that her specialized expertise was being called upon once again for operations that would define the future of federal law enforcement. Her call sign Widowmark had been earned through operational excellence that overcame institutional resistance, and her analytical capabilities were now being utilized at the highest levels of national security operations. The journey from excluded newcomer to senior leadership had prepared her for whatever challenges lay ahead, and her success had created institutional changes that would benefit federal law enforcement for generations to come. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.